What? Oh, we're on. Hey, this is Liam Scheff, and we're bringing you another episode, another exciting episode of, we're going to call it the Myths of Science pod video thing. You'll work it out. This is the producer of the show, Producer Monkey. He's feeling all right today. Take it easy. Take it easy. Don't bite. Ow. Okay. We're going to talk about something that we haven't spoken about as seriously as maybe I should have. I don't know. This is a touchy subject, and if you talk about it publicly, you get things that are more or less death threats. So let's say that I've been a little shy to just come out, as it were, and talk about it. But let's talk about it. We're going to talk about something called HIV testing, and I think HIV tests are I think they're really awful. And I know you're not supposed to say that, but I think they're really awful. And I don't think they're awful because I have a bias against finding out that you have an illness and treating it. I don't think they're awful because I wish bad things on gay people or Africans or anything like that. I think they're awful because they're dishonest. What's that, you say, Liam? Yeah, I think they're awful because they're dishonest. Now, okay, I'm going to read to you, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to read to you some excerpts from the medical literature, and I'm going to tell you where you can look them up. And I'm just going to have you ask yourself the question, does this sound like any kind of test that I'd want to take? And should doctors come forward and tell their patients all the stuff that I'm telling you? Let's just start. Okay. The HIV tests are manufactured by a number of companies. The primary manufacturer is Abbott Laboratories, and no, not like Abbott and Costello, but Abbott. This is really hard. It's actually really hard to talk about this because they're truly hateful, venomous people out there who don't want you to know about this. They actually don't want you to know, and so they attack anybody who talks about it. But what am I supposed to do? I think that we're ethically bound to try to be of use to people in the world, and if you know something that's true and you have good evidence for it, you have to come out and say it. So let's just give this a try. Abbott Laboratories. They're the longest producer of HIV tests. Now, if you open their package insert, which is the legally binding document that comes with the thing, and the lawyers say you have to put this in. Number one, it tells people how to use the test. It tells the clinicians or the lab jockeys is what I call them, the kids in the lab, the PhDs running all the equipment, the 20-something-year-olds running the PCR and the ELISA test. It tells them how to do it, how to mix, how long to hold the fluid in their mouth, how long to stand on one foot, how long to shake their head back and forth, and where to set the gradients on the machines and how high or low to set the spectrophotometer reading and all these other kinds of things that sound like gobbledygook. Well, that's in the instructions. Also, all the equations that you have to go through to figure out how to interpret the particular test you're doing. No, they're not just positive or negative. It's a world of inference. This is what it says on the Abbott Labs 1983 to 2011 test. It says this. Ready? I'm not joking. It says, at present, there is no recognized standard for establishing the presence or absence of antibodies to HIV in human blood. Let's do that again. At present, there is no recognized standard for establishing the presence or absence of antibodies to HIV in human blood. All right, this is supposedly a test for something particular, and then it says there's no standard for establishing whether this is or is not a test for this thing. In other words, the lawyers came along and they asked the guys designing it, what does this test do? I mean, you can say it does anything. You can advertise it as an HIV test, but really, because we're in America, we have to have one thin box at the bottom of an entire lie, and it's called the limitations of the test, the legal disclaimer, and that's where you tell a little bit of the truth. The lawyers say, we have to do this because somebody's going to take us to court one day and say, by the way, these tests suck. And we say, yeah, but we told you they suck. See, it's right here. At present, there is no recognized standard for establishing the presence or absence of antibodies to HIV in human blood. Problematic? It goes on. The risk of an asymptomatic, that is a not ill person, a healthy person, and with a repeatedly reactive serum sample, that is a positive, repeatedly positive blood test, developing AIDS or an AIDS-related condition is not known. All right, that's disclaimer number 2. The risk of a healthy or not sick person, whatever, just average, with a repeatedly positive test developing AIDS is not known. We don't know. This is their legal disclaimer. We have no idea This test doesn't test for one thing, and it doesn't tell you if you're going to get sick. 1 and 2. Clinical studies continue to clarify and refine the interpretation and medical significance, goes the package insert, of the presence of antibodies to HIV. Well, they just told you that tests couldn't find the presence of antibodies to HIV. So what are they saying? Clinical studies continue to clarify and refine the interpretation and medical significance of a positive test. This is the inside of an HIV test. AIDS and AIDS-related conditions are clinical syndromes. Now this is, forgive me, but this is the money shot. This is where they draw it together. AIDS and AIDS-related conditions are clinical syndromes. Clinical. You go into the doctor and you say, "Doctor, I'm white heterosexual and I have a cough and I have a flu." "Oh, okay, you have a cough and you have a flu." You go in and you say, "Doctor, I'm a gay man in my 20s, 30s, or 40s and I have a cough." And, "Oh, well, you might have AIDS." It's clinical. It's a clinical diagnosis. The clinician tells you the meaning of your illness, and then they give you a test based on your risk group. Now, we'll get into that in future episodes, God willing. God's willing, whatever you believe in. Let's finish this line. AIDS and AIDS-related conditions are clinical syndromes, and their diagnosis can only be established clinically by the clinician. ELISA testing, that's HIV testing, cannot be used to diagnose AIDS. Even if the recommended investigation of reactive specimens suggests that the antibodies to HIV are present. In English, the test cannot tell you, number one, if you're infected with anything, if you're ever going to get sick, number two. Roman numeral C, they're still interpreting the medical significance, they're still defining the interpretation, they're still clarifying and refining the interpretation. In other words, they don't know what they're talking about. And there's no rule. There are no rules. Number 4, it's all clinical. The tests don't matter, and they'll only give you a test if they consider you to be at risk. They like to avoid giving the test to you if you're not at risk. I know that sounds strange, but that's how this works. AIDS is poverty. AIDS is immune deficiency. It's not really that complicated. They dress it up with one of these tests. All the tests say the same thing, by the way. I'm not just picking on one brand. I chose the major brand because it's the first made. It's the original patent buyer, from Robert Gallo. So it's got, all the original crap proteins that come up positive for everything. So, it's tough to talk about this stuff because you get very angry people on the pharmaceutical side saying you hate this and you hate that. And you go, no, I just don't believe that we should be handing out death sentences based on totally artificial crap laboratory tests. So, all right, well, we'll join you next time. I think we'll probably continue this thread, and maybe we'll do a little bit more. We'll probably just go down the line quickly of all the things that these tests come up positive for, but we don't want to bore the audience. What's that? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for what? See you later. Oh, was I supposed to hit this button? Okay.